Bleh. Opinion, makeups and breakups. Tommy Thayer saved Kiss, and here is how he did that. This is from Andrew Daly, and it's from September 8th, 2022 on ultimateguitar.com. What if I was to tell you that if not for Tommy Thayer, Kiss would no longer exist? Well, technically, Kiss no longer exists as of right now, right? The reunion era doesn't happen, at least not as it did. Would you believe me? Okay, the reunion era, I guess, is from 1996 onward when Ace and Peter come back. If not, you should. Thayer's close relationship with Kiss dates back to 1985 when Black and Blue hit the road with Kiss on their Asylum tour in support of its Without Love record. While Black and Blue's label Geffen Records may have engineered the initial pairing, Thayer forged the relationship, a relationship that would last 37 years in running. My exact age, well, now 38 years in young and running. Mike says it's just Tommy was singing backup, sharing Gene's mic, nothing more than that. All right, fair enough. Eric Singer is on drums. Jody Ramone. In the wake of Black and Blue's dissolution in 1989, Thayer was called in to provide additional guitars on Hot in the Shades, Cuts, Betrayed, The Street Giveth, and The Street Taketh Away. This would be the beginning of Thayer's Kiss Odyssey, but it would be far from the end. Now that you've got the backstory, we can now fast forward to 1996. Kiss fans will remember the scene well. In the wake of 1995's MTV Unplugged, Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons jettisoned Eric Singer and Bruce Kulick in favor of founding members Peter Criss and Ace Frehley, assisting the Catman. Of course, there were problems, namely in the years since his dismissal, Peter Criss's skills have severely deteriorated. This was a problem, as Kiss had just let an energetic and technically sound player in Eric Singer go. With the world watching, allowing Criss to take the stage in the advanced state of drum atrophy that he was in was not an option. Things were so bad that session man Kevin Valentine was brought in to reteach Peter his parts, with Valentine even being considered to play beneath the stage while Criss pretended to play from above. How humiliating. Is this fucking for real? While the sessions with Valentine proved fruitless, Thayer, a guitarist, was brought in to assist Criss in getting back to basics and relearning his parts. Wow. By this point, Thayer had taken on an all-purpose role with Kiss, doing everything needed to keep the Kiss machine running smoothly. In this instance, Thayer, a die-hard Kiss fan and former member of premier tribute band Cold Gin. So he was in a tribute band for Kiss. He's a die-hard fan. He opened for Kiss on a tour, and he played on some session tracks. I mean, this is the guy, right? Over time, with Thayer's coaching, Criss was able to recapture at least some of his former glory and play an adequate level on the Kiss reunion tour. Without Tommy Thayer, Kevin Valentine plays drums under the stage, with Criss smiling and waving if Kiss keeps him around at all. That is fucking insane to me. That is insane to me. What's up? We got Tabletop Bob's in the house. He says, this is old news, right? The original lineup did not join at Madison Square Garden. I'm just coming into this. Apologies if I'm missing the beginning of the article. Well, this is about why Tommy Thayer is so important to Kiss, the reunion era of Kiss, right? And Jody Ramone here says, Tabletop, yes, the band played their final show last night at Madison Square Garden, right? That's very interesting. So a spaceman prepares for takeoff. Man, this could be its own documentary. I would watch the shit out of this. It soon became apparent that Peter Criss wasn't the only one who needed help. Ace Frehley's substance abuse issues through the 70s, 80s, and 90s have been well documented. And if any fans think that Frehley came into the reunion clean and sober, they are sadly mistaken. Frehley has been clean since 2006, but in 1996, his various addictions were a genuine issue for Kiss. Sure, Frehley could still play, but his substance abuse left him sloppy and unable to recall many of the parts that he had written. While Frehley was nowhere near as far gone as Chris, he certainly was going to need help to reclaim his mojo. Who do you think Stanley and Simmons called to assist the spaceman? If you guess Tommy Thayer, then it looks like you're finally beginning to catch on. So Tommy Thayer ends up becoming a glue. Wow, this is changing my whole opinion of Tommy Thayer. It's blowing my mind. It's absolutely blowing my mind. Thayer worked tirelessly with Frehley to assist him in remembering the way he had both written and played his original Kiss parts. More so, he worked with the band as a whole to recapture the way they played their older material in the Alive era. The results were staggering, and to Frehley's credit, he played wonderfully during the reunion era, and despite his issues with some guidance from Thayer, his talent took over. So really, if this is to be believed, it sounds like Ace actually owes a great debt of gratitude, or should be indebted to Thayer for what he did in helping to bring the original band. And Thayer, who probably wanted to be Ace the whole fucking time, is like, I'm such a fucking fan that like I'm going to put all my ambitions aside. He was probably so thirsty for that spot and just waiting for something. Who knows, man. It just sounds like Thayer is just a fucking diehard fan who just had his dream come true. I can really appreciate that, and I actually have a newfound respect for Thayer. See, my opinion is being changed all the time during this show that we are doing tonight. That is really interesting. So despite some issues with some guidance from Thayer, his talent took over. While he couldn't help Frehley from a personal standpoint or make him any less volatile, Thayer took Spaceman from a liability on stage to an asset. And of course he was an asset because they were making millions of dollars on having that original lineup, right? Psycho Circus. Okay, so this I do know. Psycho Circus was a huge snafu. It's the last time that the original lineup of Kiss would ever record together. They only are all featured on one track, if I recall, and the rest are session musicians. Maybe even Thayer is playing. I don't know. From a financial standpoint, Kiss's reunion tour was one of, if not the biggest concert draws of 96 to 97. And by all accounts, the vibe was great to start. But reportedly, by the end of the jaunt, old habits and grievances began to seep in, and the seeds of discord were then sown. Despite this, Simmons and Stanley decided to carry on with Chris and Frehley, and announced that the foursome would cut a record, Kiss's first with all four original members since the late 70s. Alas, as the sessions began, everything, and I mean everything, fell apart. Both Chris and Frehley demanded more money and more credit. They wanted a more significant piece of the pie, half to be exact. Now, I just want to jump in real quick because I do know this is where I can interject. They came back as hired guns. That's what happened. They left the band. Gene and Paul owned the band outright because those guys left the band. And when they came back and they were getting paid per show. Frehley was getting more money than Peter was. Peter didn't know that Ace was getting more money than Peter, and he was fucking pissed later when he found out about it. But the two of them were sowing dissent in each other because they were resentful of the fact that, Gene and Paul had just continued on with the band, and they had busted and scraped and gotten to a place where Kiss was what it was. It was an institution, continued to be an institution, but it didn't continue to be an institution just because of Ace and Peter, who were always fan favorites, man. That I know. I mean, everybody loves Beth. And I think Paul Stanley was kind of a hater, right? He was a bit of a hater on Peter for, always trying to diminish his credit for writing Beth. saying that he had a ghostwriter for Beth, and obviously the resentment towards Ace and his, great guitar playing. It can't be denied that he was an incredible guitar player, right? So that's interesting too. So they wanted half the pie. With an album to record and contractual obligations to meet, Stanley and Simmons were given no choice but to push on, and they did. Thayer would go on to play lead. Okay, so Thayer did get selected. Thayer would go on to play lead guitar on nearly the entirety of Psycho Circus, which I'm sure he did not object to. I'm sure he was very stoked about that. The only exception being Frehley's Into the Void, which was recorded late in the game. Psycho Circus is a polarizing album amongst fans, but there's no denying it's a top-tier classic. The guitar work is sublime and some of the best of Tommy Thayer's career. The album doesn't happen without Thayer, and the reunion era probably comes to a dead stop right then and there, thus ending Kiss. Is this a bold statement? Buckle up. I'm not done. All right, so there's more to it. This is fucking fast. I was not intending for this, but this is fascinating to me. A reunion breeds a sad farewell. Kisstory dictates the rest of the reunion story, which only rolled downhill at a disastrous rate from 1998 onward. Psycho Circus's supporting tour was fine at face value, but Chris' physical and mental state was badly deteriorating. As for Frehley, his playing remained first rate, but he appeared disinterested and was increasingly unreliable off stage. Couple that with the duo's volatile nature and daily mood swings. I mean, this is listen, one thing's for certain. The piece we are reading right now has a bias against both Ace and Peter. Okay. And the truth is, like, this fandom and this feud loves to have a villain side and a hero side. And the reality is I don't think any which side is hero or villain. Everybody is, right? Everybody is, and that's what it is, right? So, coupled with the duo's volatile nature and daily mood swings, and Simmons and Stanley had a set of problems, and that Simmons and Stanley had a set of problems on their hands. Bob says, you can tell how much Gene and Paul hated Peter and Ace. There's a famous interview where Ace can barely speak. He was so off. Right. That's from the Tomorrow Show, I believe. Right, Bob? And that's from the Tomorrow Show in 1981. That was right before Ace left the band. He was like drunk all the time. And he's like giggling incessantly. And Gene is like razor serious and super friggin' annoyed with what's going on. With seemingly no other option, a tired Simmons, this is just like totally like bend. The bend is totally on Simmons and Stanley's side. A tired Simmons and Stanley decided to launch the Kiss Farewell Tour in 2000. So this is really what we're really learning is the history as well of not only just the reunion, but the farewell tour. So they went from reuniting to faring well or fare thee well in 2000. Although before it was sort of retroactively recontextualized as a farewell to the original lineup, which is technically it was. As the tour wore on, interpersonal relationships grew increasingly worse, with Thayer prepared to suit up and take the stage in place of Frehley on a nightly basis. Could you imagine being a ginormous Kiss fan? You are the band's fixer. You are the reason why the reunion shows have gone off. And now Gene and Paul, your two fucking idols, heroes, whatever, they're basically like, you need to be on standby to be the Spaceman at any moment if Ace just like loses it. I mean, that's gotta be what a heavy situation, man. What a heavy sort of situation. As the tour wore on, he prepared. Okay, towards the end of the tour, Peter Criss threw a tantrum and quit the band after destroying his drum kit at the end of a show in South Carolina. Why? He found out that Frehley was making more money than him. Remember what I said? Frehley was making like 50 grand per show, and I think Peter was making 30, and he was fucking pissed about that. Ouch. As Kiss fans will remember, the tour limped to the finish line, thus ending the reunion and potentially ending the band. During this period, Thayer showed his mettle and proved a stabilizing force during a depressing era in history. So if you are a fan of Kiss, and to you, the entire history of Kiss is all valid, like every era of Kiss is valid. You're not just one of those purists who just loves the original lineup of Kiss or whatever. Like you accept every single iteration of Kiss, then this period is friggin' crucial, and Thayer is a savior. If you are a fan of the original lineup, then this is all Drek to you on some level, right? I don't have a horse in this race because I'm not, I'm not really a Kiss fan. I'm like kind of a casual whatever as I'm discussing this right now. So during this period, Thayer showed his mettle and proved a stabilizing force during a depressing era in Kisstory. I guess that's what Kiss fans call it, is Kisstory, right? With Frehley's commitment wavering and his reliability in question, Thayer presented an alternative for Simmons and Stanley, opening the door for what was to come. Wow, this is absolutely fascinating. Kiss is Reborn with Thayer on guitar. These days, Tommy Thayer gets an awful lot of hate for wearing Ace Frehley's Spaceman makeup, but I always ask fans what they might have done given the same chance. That's also a good point. Thayer's first official show as Kiss's lead guitarist was in 2003. So he's been in the band for 20 years, and he has maintained the role brilliantly ever since. I don't know if everybody would agree with that, but okay. For those keeping score, Thayer is Kiss's longest-serving lead guitarist in the last 20 years. Kiss has played some of the greatest stages of its career in no small part due to the efforts of Thayer. Okay, I'm going to say something, and it's going to be not controversial, but this is like saying that Dez, love you, Dez, to no end. This is like saying that Dez is the longest serving guitar player in the Misfits. Like it's just not, you cannot make that sort of statement in that kind of way, right? Like that's a weird thing. That's like a weird sort of thing. Like, sure, the unvolatile, easygoing, Axeman that can just sort of conform to whatever the boss needs. Of course, they're going to be there for 20 drama-free years. But, is that the stuff that everybody, knows the band and loves them for? Like, no, like nobody thinks of The Devil's Reign when they think of the Misfits. They think of, Earth AD and Walk Among Us. Nobody thinks of Monster or Psycho Circus. I think they think of like, those classic records, those, especially in like circa 75 to 79 for Kiss, right? Or like Rob. Yeah, exactly. We were talking about Metallica earlier, Bob. He is beloved, but it's funny. I was saying, just not to rehash everything, but I was saying this earlier. If Lars or James, if Rob left Metallica, or if not Keith, what's his face, Kirk left Metallica, or even Lars left Metallica, they probably would still go on as Metallica. If James is the irreplaceable linchpin of Metallica. Without James, they cannot be Metallica. I think they would find a way to be Metallica without any one of those guys. But James is like the centerpiece. Right. You think of Dead Alive when you think of the Misfits. Exactly. Precisely. So that's like a weird thing to say, that he's the longest tenured, like, so what? I don't know, man. That's a weird reasoning. I still have great respect for Tommy after reading this, but that's like weird. That's a weird thing to say. If Thayer didn't assume the Spaceman role in 2003, Kiss would have quietly died in the wake of the farewell tour. Instead, that tour was a farewell to Chris and Frehley and the rebirth of Kiss as a viable entity. Right. And that's what Gene and Paul love to, that's how they like the history to be. In the ensuing years, a genuine brotherhood has formed on and off stage. And for those who have witnessed Kiss perform, this lineup's chemistry is undeniable. Sure, he's playing a lot of the licks that I think that's one of the big controversies, that Thayer is just aping the stuff that Ace Ace does. But if you understand the guitar and can differentiate their styles, one can hear Thayer's playing is far different from Frehley's. This is especially apparent if you've seen Frehley live lately. I would also say that Thayer is quite clearly one of his biggest influences, probably Ace. So of course their playing is going to have similar DNA. Like that makes sense. I have all the love in the world for Ace, but his sloppy approach, rings clattering against his guitar strings, and buzzing feedback present as a far cry from Thayer's clean-toned and blue-inspired licks. Frehley has a vibrato unlike any other and a style that has inspired millions, but Thayer is a hero in his own right. And at this juncture, he's playing the Kiss's classic tunes better than Frehley is. Oof. Wow. That is something. Stop hating and start loving Tommy Thayer. I will never understand why so much hate is thrown in the way of the six-string hero that saved Kiss, Tommy Thayer. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley created Kiss 50 years ago, along with Peter Criss and Ace Frehley. That will always be the band's humble origin story, but that doesn't mean Kiss should be forced to relegate themselves to hell on earth to keep something together that doesn't work. That opens up the conversation about what makes a band and when does a band stop being a band. And in the case of Kiss, they have these masks that they can put on people to try and keep the continuity more seamless, but it still doesn't exclude them from that conversation at all, in the least, right? No, Simmons and Stanley chose an avenue that allowed them to continue the Kiss's legacy and choose a guitarist who could help accomplish that on a personal, creative, and professional level, Tommy Thayer. That doesn't make Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley greedy. It makes them intelligent business people and shows the pride that they harbor for what they've created. I can't deny that either. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, everybody, like, there's no like overwhelmingly right or wrong opinion in this conversation at all. Like, none whatsoever. Like, they're both, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. I firmly believe that if any of you were presented with the same choice, you'd have done the same. Probably. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't. Professional, talented, loyal, creative. Yes. Okay. Tommy Thayer is all of these things and more. Wow. This guy loves Tommy Thayer. And you'd think after 20 years of service, the Kiss Army would send some of that love back Thayer's way, right? Wrong. No, it's always the same short-sighted, myopic hate. It's always the same tired diatribe about original members and musical integrity, as if hiding and hating behind a keyboard shows any integrity at all. I mean, but that is like, it's an eternal debate because musical integrity and original members are so essential to a band being a band, right? Here's the deal, Kiss fans. Tommy Thayer wasn't planning on being in Kiss. That I don't believe. He never asked, and he had no entitlement-based expectations upon entry. That I believe, but I refuse to believe that Tommy Thayer wasn't planning on being Kiss. I'm sure he was circling that spot, and it eventually landed on him, and he was not complaining. I get it, rightfully so. No, he was given the opportunity of a lifetime, and he took it and ran with it. Yeah, God bless. Over 2 decades, Thayer's hard work has kept Kiss's wheels greased. Simmons and Stanley only ever wanted bandmates who would share their commitment to excellence, something Ace couldn't do. I will agree that, apart from like the exploitative nature of Stanley and Simmons and their marketing approach, like they did have a commitment to maybe they didn't have a commitment to necessarily what we would consider excellence, but they had a commitment to like, a certain standard in work ethic, right? That cannot be denied, And what about Ace? Ace walked away from Kiss in 2002, just as he did in 1982. In the ensuing years, he's regretted it. That's obvious on many levels. And if you don't see that, then you're probably not paying attention. You know why I'm not sure that he totally regretted it? Because if he really, truly wanted back in, they would let him in. They would let him in a limited capacity. Ace would be making money on the shows. But the reality is he licensed the makeup to those guys, and he makes money on the side anyway. Ace has been paid well for that makeup, right? Um, for 20 years, Freely has watched from afar, witnessing Kiss from the ashes to dominate the world again. More so, Ace watched Tommy do all that he used to do and more. I love Ace, but it's painfully apparent that Kiss didn't need him then and they don't need him now. That I disagree with. I don't think you can say that about Ace and what his contributions were to the band. And even Paul, you hear it in Paul and Gene interviews all the time, acknowledge Ace's contribution. It's just the fact that they don't want to work with him. Kiss needed Tommy Thayer, and that's why, despite Ace's public calls to rejoin and reclaim his role, he's quietly denied. He's quietly denied. Tommy Thayer has shown loyalty. Yeah, right. We know you love Tommy, and you're just going to keep talking about his loyalty and showmanship and reliability. As such, Kiss's commitment to Tommy Thayer is unwavering. Haters and fair weather fans should take a lesson. Now, what kind of partnership do you think Tommy Thayer? You think he's just still a hired gun? Do you think he has a junior equity in Kiss? Like Paul and Gene are never going to give up their majority stakes in Kiss. But do you think that Tommy has a few points on the back end that he gets some sort of what kind of deal he gets? I would imagine something. I mean, that this lineup was together for nearly 20 years. Now on its end of the road world tour, Kiss remains the hottest band in the land and puts on the greatest shows on earth. I don't know about that, but it's definitely a fun, interesting show. Tommy Thayer's presence over the long haul has given Kiss something once again. Given Kiss something once thought impossible, the chance to reclaim the lost glory and bow out on their terms. While he's a legend, that's a hell of a lot more than Ace Frehley. Love him as I do, was willing to give. Sorry, I read that really, really, really bad. For those reasons and more, I'd wager that Tommy Thayer saved Kiss. Very interesting hot take. And then we could dive into the comments. I'm not going to. There's just so many. Actually, there's not that many, but I don't know if they're, whatever. Ravner says Tommy Thayer is a well-paid sideman. Billy says, no matter what side you're on, as an artist side of it, Gene and Paul still gave Ace and Peter another opportunity to return. And that's all a true artist is looking for, is nothing more than opportunity. That is, Billy, you are right about that as well.